Morning.
Morning. The hardest part about Brexit is the borders. As part of the European Union, the United Kingdom's borders have been relatively open for years. Trades carried out freely with other member countries, and people coming through only need to show their EU passport. But in June 2016, the UK voted to leave the EU so that it could reassert control on its own borders and decide who and what it wanted to let through. Imagine these boundaries turning into hard borders. The impact of that on these maritime borders is complicated in terms of trade, but it could have serious implications for the people living along the UK's only overland border here. This border between Northern Ireland and the Republic of Ireland is one of the reasons why Brexit negotiations continue to reach a deadlock. That's because this isn't just a boundary between two countries. It's also a compromise, a symbol of identity, a solution to a troubled history, and it's been keeping the peace in Northern Ireland for 20 years. Pardoning this border could put one of Europe's greatest success stories in jeopardy. This border was first drawn in 1920 by the British, who had ruled over the island for centuries. The Irish had rebelled several times, but not everyone wanted the British to leave. So eventually the UK divided the island into two states based on its population. Most people in this part were historically Catholic, identified as Irish, and wanted independence. They were known as nationalists. But in the north, many people were Protestant, identified more closely as British, and wanted to stay in the UK. They were called Unionists. After the partition, this part remained in the UK as Northern Ireland.
We made that decision as a people quite freely and for very definite reasons. Reasons that are historical, reasons that are cultural, and reasons that are economic.
The South continued to move away from the UK until it gained complete independence and became a new country, the Republic of Ireland. At first, this 499-kilometer border was pretty porous, but the UK and Ireland continued to be hostile. Over time, customs checks were set up at the border crossings, and the two countries descended into a trade war. Tariffs were placed on agricultural produce and goods like steel and coal. By the late 1960s, things turned violent.
Violence like this hit Northern Ireland after years of simmering business between the Catholic minority and the ruling Protestant regime.
In Northern Ireland, fierce conflict broke out between extremist groups. Nationalist paramilitaries like the Irish Republican Army believed that Northern Ireland was rightfully part of Ireland, and that the British were oppressors of Northern Ireland's nationalist population. Unionist paramilitaries fought back, defending their place in the UK. Both groups blew up buildings, set off car bombs, and engaged in bloody street fighting. The UK deployed thousands of troops to Northern Ireland during this time and became a common target of nationalist paramilitary attacks, especially at the border, which for nationalists was the ultimate symbol of British occupation.
Welsh Fusiliers who patrolled this stretch of the border described in court as the main battle line between the IRA and the army have suffered repeated attacks.
As violence surged, the UK military tried to secure the border with walls, towers, heavy guns, and patrols. They tightly controlled the 20 official crossings and screened people and vehicles passing through. The conflict in Northern Ireland turned this into a hard border. The violence lasted for more than 30 years, killed over 3,600 people, and came to be known as the Troubles. It came to an end in 1998, when the Nationalist and Unionist Party leaders came together for a historic peace deal. They reached a compromise. Northern Ireland would remain in the UK, but people would be eligible for both Irish and UK citizenships. And in the future, Northern Ireland could vote to join Ireland. This deal came to be known as the Good Friday Agreement. It allowed nationalists in Northern Ireland to be part of the Republic of Ireland, while the Unionists remained part of the UK, which meant that this hard border wasn't needed anymore. So the British military left. The watchtowers came down and more roads opened. There are now around 270 official crossings, most of which are completely invisible. And they're all part of a border that stands as a symbol of the compromise that ended decades of conflict.
The British people have voted to leave the European Union.
Reignited a fierce debate over Northern Ireland's future.
Because both are members of the European Union. But when Britain pulls out of the EU,
it's now an outer EU border, and the question is, do we put up barbed wire again? Soldiers, it will be a customs border at the very least.
In June 2016, the UK voted to leave the EU, even though Northern Ireland was overwhelmingly in favor of remaining. The UK's argument in favor of Brexit was to control its own national borders, but there was little mention of its Irish border at the time. That changed when the UK and EU started negotiations. The status of the Irish border became one of the first three things to figure out. Now, more than a year later, it's still unresolved, but there are a few options. The UK could reimpose a hard border by bringing back the police and the walls, but that would isolate the population of nationalists in Northern Ireland. Alternatively, they could put the border here, leaving Northern Ireland in the EU customs union, but separating it from the UK mainland. But this would betray the Unionists. See, either way, both of these options risk violating the Good Friday Agreement. A third option is for the UK to stay in the EU customs union, meaning it wouldn't need a customs border. But that's unacceptable for Brexiters in the UK government, who specifically want control over their own borders. The UK needs to put a border somewhere, but just can't decide where.
In relation to the border between Northern Ireland and Ireland, we will not return to a hard border between Northern Ireland and Ireland, but the suggestion that there should be a border down the Irish Sea separating Northern Ireland from the rest of the United Kingdom is completely unacceptable. We are not going to be in a customs union. We're not going to be in the customs union, because if we were, that would prevent us from being able to follow an independent trade policy.
Now, there's a fourth option that would be in line with the Good Friday Agreement. It's the idea of reunification. In the past, when both Ireland and the UK were in the EU and the borders were open, there was little incentive for Northern Ireland to vote to reunite with the Republic of Ireland. But if the UK went with the option of hard borders, Northern Ireland would be isolated, and the only way to rejoin the EU would be through reunification. Typically, this would be an overwhelming victory for the nationalists and a loss for the unionists. But Brexit seems to have changed some opinions. A recent poll found that 28% of respondents who supported Northern Ireland's place in the UK would now vote to join the Republic of Ireland. While not a perfect solution, it would give Northern Ireland a voice about its own place in Europe, a voice that's barely been heard so far.
Off by using the union a country? It's a bit of a strange question, with an easy answer, but a difficult explanation. The answer is no. The European Union is not a country, but you can move between countries without passing through border control, work between countries without a visa.
Okay, hi everyone. It's Friday of December 4, the end of the 14th week of our semester, and we have one more week of classes and individual meetings next week on Zoom, everything on Zoom. And before I forget, I want to remind you that the topic of those meetings that we will have on Zoom individually, as well as the individual classes, will be to discuss the first draft of your final take-home examination paper. Just to remind you that I already posted that some time ago here. And so you're supposed to submit that by tomorrow morning at 7 o'clock in the morning, okay? By tomorrow morning at 7 o'clock in the morning. And then I will spend the weekend writing comments and sending them back to you. And so here is the topic, the European Union policymaking take-home final examination paper assignment, address the question, define European foreign policy, explain why this term has assumed wide usage amongst those who study the European Union's international role. Okay, and the same format as with the midterm. Make sure you use and cite information from at least 3 different chapters, from chapters 6 to 10 of the course textbook, all right, as a requirement of the essay, okay? And let me open up the syllabus and to tell you also to remind you what the syllabus has to say, if I can find it here. it might be too much trouble because there's too many files you can see piling up in my folder. By the time I find it, it takes too long. So it says European Union policy making, and so actually it should say, well, chapter 6 through 11. That's kind of an issue. 6 through 11. Okay, well, I think because let's make that 6 through 11. But yeah, everything's complicated because of the change in the semester. But yeah, chapters 6 through 11 of the course textbook, and you can see that chapter 6 began after the midterm break. So 6 through 11, including the conclusion. So you can use information from the conclusion if you would like, but you don't have to, of course. But for the final exam. And one other issue regarding the assignments, you can see there is also for chapter 15 next week, also 150 word paragraph that's due next Wednesday as well. So the 9th of December. And on this topic, to South Korean European integration as a blueprint for global integration. So, all right, so before I forget, let's do attendance. And so your smart attendance for week 14 is, the magic number is 716. 716 is your number for smart attendance and policymaking in the European Union, 716. And okay, so make sure, don't forget to do that. And okay, so let's go back to talking about Ireland and the breakup of the potential breakup of the United Kingdom. And so we go back to the folder for this week in here, and we click here, and Brexit here. These notes, of course, you've already been reading about. But since the video I was showing was talking about Ireland and the Irish question, what's the latest information regarding the Irish issue in the negotiations for the United Kingdom to leave the single market of the European Union? And it's still confusion. It's still generally a great deal of confusion. So you can see here, well, let's just continue to talk about Northern Ireland. So here's a BBC report from a couple days ago about the negotiations about what to do with Northern Ireland. And you saw from that Vox video on Northern Ireland that the discussion was, let me see if I can go to Wikipedia to call up an image here. So United Kingdom, there was the proposal that there is supposed to be a, see if I can find a better, closer picture of this. That there is supposed to be, Northern Ireland will remain, of course, part of the United Kingdom, but there is going to be a customs border, a customs border instituted somehow between Northern Ireland and the island of Great Britain. This is Great Britain, this is Ireland, and there is going to be a customs border so that items coming from Great Britain, the island of Great Britain, will have to go through a customs check to meet European Union single market requirements before items shipped from Scotland and England and Wales go to Northern Ireland. If they're going to go to Northern Ireland, they have to meet European Union market requirements in terms of tariffs and regulations that they must meet, because they're not going to put a hard border. There's not going to be a change in the border between Northern Ireland and the Republic of Ireland. And so how do you do that? Of course, this is There's no land border between the island of Ireland and the island of Great Britain. So this customs restrictions and regulations and supervision and verification process by the customs police and the border police, customs officials has to happen in Great Britain. It has to happen here in this territory in order to be able to send products from the island of Great Britain to Northern Ireland, because there will be no border between, no customs border still between Northern Ireland and Ireland and the Republic of Ireland, even though Northern Ireland will remain part of the United Kingdom. So courts, laws, police. So this is obviously complicated, complex. And how is it going to be implemented? And it's supposed to be implemented on January 1, so in less than a month from now. Well, we really don't know how it's supposed to be implemented. Did you see what I was showing there? I forgot to check to make sure that, let me see, I have to go there, I have to share screen. And I don't know if I was showing you this. This is what I was trying to show here. There's the island of Great Britain and the island of Ireland. And so the border, customs border will be placed in basically in the ocean between the island of Great Britain and the island of Ireland. And so any products being shipped from here, from the island of Great Britain to Northern Ireland, have to go through customs border checks here before they're put on a ship and sent over to here, to Northern Ireland, because there will continue to be no hard border, no customs border between Northern Ireland and the Republic of Ireland, even as Northern Ireland remains part of the United Kingdom. So that's the plan. And so it has to be implemented here. And this is, of course, a major problem. If you're a beverage producer or a manufacturer that has always been supplying companies and customers here in Northern Ireland, while you're producing items and goods, agricultural goods, manufactured goods, to send them to Northern Ireland, to customers in Northern Ireland, now there's going to be regulations and tariff restrictions put on that you will have to follow as United Kingdom, say, adopts a free trade agreement with India, let us say, or with the United States, and United Kingdom adopts special tariff and non-tariff regulations to conform with the FTA, the free trade agreement with India or United States, for example. But still, you, as an English producer, if you're still supplying customers here in Northern Ireland, you also have to continue to adapt and make sure that your products will maintain the requirements of the European Union. So if you're a producer of beverages in England and you reach an FTA, a free trade agreement with the United States, and the United States has different sanitary requirements regarding chicken exports, let's say chicken, right? That's a big topic. The Americans do not require that chicken, Americans require that chicken be sterilized with chemicals before they're sent to America to be sold to American consumers. But the European Union does not allow using chlorine in sterilizing chicken. Chlorine is a chemical that is used in sterilization, and so Britain is leaving the European Union, and so it's going to start producing chickens for export to the United States that are going to be sterilized with chlorine. But if you're a producer, a small chicken farmer in England, a small farm producing chicken products, poultry products in England, now you have to come up with new kinds of requirements to meet both the European Union requirements, which still apply even here, not to mention to Ireland and the rest of the European Union, and also to satisfy the Americans. And you can understand that. I mean, if you understand that you are supplying the European Union, you have to meet one set of standards. And if you're supplying the Americans, you have to supply another set of standards. But now, let's say you've been supplying Northern Ireland consumers of chicken for the longest time. And now, even though you are now having to meet American requirements, because now you see a big opportunity to export your chicken to the United States, you still have to invest and maintain the capability to export chickens to Northern Ireland according to European Union requirements, even though Northern Ireland is part of your country, the United Kingdom. So it's complicated. It's complicated. And so complicated, companies do not really have a clear idea of what they need to do. So, for example, you see, as I was showing you in that report, if I can find it again, about the production or the news report I was showing you in Great Britain, trying to explain what they need to do to prepare, and it's not clear what they need to do to prepare. This is just highlighting all of the questions. What about online shopping? What about food products? What about a trade deal, and so on? And so the here's another, if I can find it, news report highlighting the complexity of this issue. This is from The Guardian, and it highlights that these are British companies, right? These are British companies that produce, and it's not letting me. Okay, let's see if I can get rid of that. I can't get rid of that. Okay, so it says here, 4 in 10 UK food firms to cut supplies to Northern Ireland. This is just from a few minutes ago. This a Guardian report was posted. So, you know, these food firms, these companies that produce food, they've been supplying their customers in Northern Ireland for many, 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 many years. And now, because there's going to be a customs border between Northern Ireland and the rest of the United Kingdom, between Northern Ireland, between basically the islands of Ireland and the island of Great Britain, these 4 in 10 UK food firms don't know what to do. They don't know how to satisfy what they need to do right now in order to meet the requirements to continue to supply Northern Ireland stores and Northern Ireland consumers, because they don't know it. They don't know what the rules are yet. So just to show you the complexity that this is generating, because, you know, this Great Britain and Northern Ireland together, the United Kingdom, they've been together for centuries, and now suddenly UK food firms don't know what to do. They're going to reduce their supplies to Northern Ireland because they don't know how to organize their own business, because they don't know what the rules are, clearly, for trying to meet the requirements to allow Northern Ireland to remain part of the European Union single market. So it's a very strange situation. Okay, so let's go to a poll. Let me see what else I have here in my okay, so that's good. I think. But what are the benefits of leaving the European Union? The benefits include the fact that you could argue, and I'm sure Brexiters are arguing right now, that the benefits include the fact that the UK, United Kingdom, is the first country to approve and distribute the new coronavirus vaccine. So the first vaccinations of British subjects in United Kingdom will start on Monday at 7 o'clock in the morning. And because the United Kingdom is the first country to approve the new vaccines that have been produced, and United Kingdom did it before the Americans. The Americans are not going to meet and approve the new vaccine until next week, a week from now, right? And what about the European Union? They're not going to meet until at least, I think, 2 weeks from now, maybe even 3 weeks from now, that they're going to meet at the end of this month. The European Union regulatory agencies are going to meet at the end of this month to approve the vaccine. So it goes here in this news report, it highlights that Britain gave emergency authorization on Wednesday, 2 days ago, to the Pfizer coronavirus vaccine, the Pfizer-BioNTech coronavirus vaccine. Pfizer is the American company that developed the vaccine together with a German company, BioNTech. And just to highlight the news report, rather than focus on all of this long report, while the go-ahead bodes well for Britain, which broke from the European Union's regulatory orbit to approve the shot early, it will have no effect on the distribution of the hundreds of millions of doses that other wealthy countries have procured in prepaid contracts. So they started buying this vaccine before it was even produced, and Pfizer and the other companies began manufacturing it even before it was approved, because they assumed it was likely to be approved, but they couldn't be certain. And if it was not going to be approved, they would have to throw them away, but it's being approved. And so Britain is the first country to approve a new vaccine and begin inoculating thousands and thousands of people in Britain. And it goes on in this news report, after the government strengthened an old law that allows Britain to step out from under the European Union's regulatory umbrella in public health emergencies, its Medicines and Healthcare Products Regulatory Agency fast-tracked review of the Pfizer vaccine. So that's the British regulatory agency, Medicines and Healthcare Products Regulatory Agency. And another highlight, Britain's power to approve vaccines before the European Union, which has its own drug regulator, applies for now only on an emergency basis, but it will become permanent after Britain consummates its split from the bloc on December 31st. So Britain is still technically part of the single market of the European Union until 3 weeks from now. So the British, to break from the European single market requirements, declared emergency authorization, that there was a national emergency. So even though Britain is still part of the regulation framework of the single European market for another 3 weeks until the end of this month, they use their emergency authorization of their national government to begin vaccinating people this coming Monday. So, but then when Britain leaves the European Union at the end of this month, the authorization by that British agency becomes permanent, because Britain is no longer legally obligated to follow the European Union single market regulations. So, but it will become permanent after Britain consummates its split from the bloc on December 31st, making the speed of the Pfizer approval an early sign in the eyes of the government of the flexibility it will have once the country fully untethered itself from the rest of Europe. So that was always a theme among pro-Brexit, pro-exit of Great Britain from the European Union, was that the European Union was slowing down the United Kingdom, that the European Union was a burden on Britain, that Britain could not be flexible and adaptable to exploit the newest developments in technology. And we highlighted how, for example, the European Union is hesitant to approve genetically modified organisms in agriculture, and the British are more strongly in favor of that, supposedly. And here, a Brexiter could point to this, right? Say, look, the European Union, they're not going to approve this vaccine until the end of the month, right? And the report goes on, yet Brexit has also exacted costs, starving Britain's drug regulator, that agency I highlighted earlier. It used to draw contracts from the European Union. So that regulator, that British regulator, this regulator, its Medicines and Health, it has a very good reputation for expertise and skill in its field, and it had received contracts from other European companies to approve and analyze and approve new drugs and medicines being produced in Europe on behalf of the rest of the European Union. But now that agency is losing those contracts as European Union companies, pharmaceutical companies are devoting their business and their attention to agencies and regulatory bodies within the European Union itself. The European Medicines Agency, which regulates vaccines across the European Union, is expected to make a decision with the Pfizer vaccine later in December. So like the Food and Drug Administration in the United States, the FDA, the European Medicines Agency has scheduled a high-profile meeting with outside experts before approval. And it goes on to state here that the United States has already bought 100 million doses in advance of the vaccine in advance from Pfizer, and the European Union has already pre-purchased 200 million doses. And but the British are going to go down in history from now on as we look back in the future at this once in a century event. The first country to begin distributing the vaccine and among its citizens, among thousands of its citizens, is Great Britain, United Kingdom. Not Great Britain, I should say the United Kingdom. So please respond to the following statement. The UK's, United Kingdom's early approval of the Pfizer-BioNTech COVID-19 vaccine shows that the European Union is too large and complex to function most effectively for the well-being of Europeans. And so let's do a poll, and we go to polling, and we go to this poll. So please vote. Forty seconds. Thirty seconds. 20 seconds. 10 seconds. Okay, so there you see the results. Most of you either agree or you're neutral, cannot decide. And so let's break into an exercise group, a discussion group, and let me divide you into 4 different groups. So let's say the last person listed in the group, will respond to, let's see if I can find that again, share screen, that's a second, share screen. So again, to remind you what the question is, it says here, you're going to form into groups and try to place your group along this continuum from 1 to 5 about strongly agree to strongly disagree. And so the last person that Zoom randomly assigns to your groups, the last person will be the chair of the group. So let's see what happens. And the groups are Hyun Chong Song for group 1, Chae Yong Kyung for group 2, Cho Hyun Chun for group 3, and Laura Starrett for group 4. So prepare your statement. Please join your groups and prepare your statement. And once again, this is the task, and I'm trying to find the task again because it disappeared. There it is. There's the task. So where does your group fall along this continuum? And the person that's the chair of the group, explain your group's position along this continuum. I mean, think how much the world has been obsessed for 10 months now with the coronavirus world crisis, how it's affected your life, my life, and the Europeans are not going to approve the vaccine for, well, let's say 2 more weeks. More than 2 weeks. So what I saw is they're saying sometime between Christmas and New Year's. I mean, we can't waste any day. If the vaccine is a burden, why? If the vaccine is not safe, why are the British approving it? If it's not safe, why are we waiting? Why do we have to wait? If the British were so high professional standards in their work, why didn't the European Union adopt those standards when it created its own European Medicines Agency? It said here that the British had the Medicines and Healthcare Products Regulatory Agency of Great Britain, of the United Kingdom. They are losing money because they're no longer getting contracts to regulate and approve and analyze new drugs from the rest of the European Union. Well, why didn't the European Union adopt the British model? If the British are so high prestige and so professional.
Welfare.
French. France have vaccine in next year and January and
Hello? Who's in charge of group 3?
Yes.
Oh, good. Okay, Cho Hyun Jun.
Some of people's mind.
I don't.
Okay, so who's going to speak first for the four groups? And so we will again flip a coin, and heads is groups 1 and 2. And it is tails, so it's groups 3 and 4. Heads is group 3, and it is tails, it's group 4. So Laura Steyert, what did your group decide in terms of where you are along this continuum, 1 through 5? Where would you place your group?
Well, we would place ourselves between 3 and 4.
So why
Because
do you
we-
disagree, mildly disagree?
Because we feel like there's no link between finding the vaccine and the European Union being proven too large and complex to function. I feel like if the European Union, for example, would be the first to find a vaccine, everybody would say, oh, look, it's a great system, it functions very effectively.
But
And-
it's a German company, just for the sake of argument, not that I disagree with you, but I like to argue with you. I mean, BioNTech is a German company. It's BioNTech that worked with Pfizer. Pfizer's a huge, huge multinational pharmaceutical company, one of the biggest companies in the world. But BioNTech is the one that developed this technology, and it's a German company. And it's not producing the vaccine for Germans. It's not producing the vaccine for Europeans. It's sending them to Britain, to the United States, because it's not yet approved in the European Union.
Well, just because we're more hesitant towards the approval, don't mean that the entire structure of the European Union is too complex to function or not effectively enough for the well-being of Europeans. If Americans would have been, for example, the first to find it, would we then argue about the effectiveness of the European Union? If, for example, we approve it within here and 5 days and China waits another month, would we say that China is ineffective? I feel like we are comparing two things that shouldn't be compared.
Well, I mean, of course, the Russians claim that their Sputnik 5 vaccine was ready to go months ago, although, of course, now they just said that some months ago. And now I think yesterday or today, they announced that they have completed their phase 3 trials where you have to, use random sampling for 30 or 40,000 people. And right, but if you're one of these people who's lost a grandfather or a grandmother or a family member to the COVID-19, or maybe who will lose that grandmother or grandfather, maybe not today, but maybe in a month from now or 2 months from now, as this pandemic continues, because it's going to take months to get everybody vaccinated, right? Like we're not going to be vaccinated here in Korea until springtime, probably, if that, to people like you and me. And you lose your grandmother, grandfather, and you always will wonder, well, if I was in Britain now, would my grandmother, grandfather have been vaccinated earlier than they're being vaccinated? Every day, hundreds of people are dying, and every day, thousands of people are dying as a result of COVID-19. Every day. And the US, they just had its highest death rate ever. I think almost 3,000 people died from complications from the virus. Yesterday was the highest death toll ever. So every day counts, right? And so, and of course, the most famous person to die of the COVID-19 is a French person. Well, not the most famous person, but a famous person who just died of the COVID-19 is, let's see if I can find it here, Valéry Giscard d'Estaing, the former president of Great Britain, who, let's see if I can find him here. He died 2 days ago. There he is, Valéry Giscard d'Estaing, at the age of 94 years old. He's a very old man. He was 94 years old. He died of COVID-19 complications. It says here, Giscard died of complications associated with COVID-19 on 2nd December 2020. He was 94 years old. And so he came up earlier in this class because I noted to him that he was the chairperson, the chair of the Constitutional Convention that met from 2001 to 2004. He served as president of the Convention on the European Union, on the Convention on the Future of Europe, I should say. And on 29 October 2004, 16 years ago, the European heads of state gathered in Rome, approved and signed the European Constitution based on a draft strongly influenced by Giscard's work on the convention. But nevertheless, the voters of France rejected the draft European Constitution. But again, he was made chair of that convention partly in order to try to encourage the French to support the draft constitution, again, reflecting the critical role of German and French cooperation. They note here you see Justin at Helmut Schmidt's funeral. Helmut Schmidt was a Social Democratic Party, Socialist Party Prime Minister, Chancellor of Germany from 1974 to 82, or West Germany. And he worked closely with Giscard d'Estaing, who was conservative Gaullist, belonging to the Charles de Gaulle wing of French right-wing politicians. And it says here that he gets credit for pushing for the European Council to begin to form. The European Council is the top body within the European Union. Under political cooperation, he and Helmut Schmidt took the lead in promoting that political cooperation. Even though he was right-wing and Helmut Schmidt was left-wing, later Francois Mitterrand will replace him as president, would defeat him in an election in 1981 in France and become president of France. And Francois Mitterrand would work closely with Helmut Kohl of the German right-wing party, that together that they also would play a critical role at the end of the Cold War in promoting and re-accelerating and intensifying the efforts of European integration in the 1980s, when it became clear that something important was going on in the communist world and in the Soviet Union. But so just to point out that what if your parent, one of your own relatives passes, and you always will wonder in the next few weeks if the European Union had moved more swiftly, maybe my parents or my grandparent or my great-grandparent would have been vaccinated. So I'm just trying to show you the emotional intensity behind these issues, right? Because like I like to highlight in my class, right? You can't really explain politics and international relations unless you somehow are able to conceptualize the role of emotion.
Yeah, but I feel like if for example, the European Union would approve a vaccine way too soon, and in the long run, it proves to be deadly to people, for example, who have diabetics, and someone dies who has diabetics, who was vaccinated. Imagine the outrage then. Like, oh, the European Union did not do its job well, and they agreed too soon, and they just killed another person, you know?
Well, okay, but just for the sake of discussion, right? I mean, do you think that the British are not competent?
No, not at all. But I feel like, is it so bad to be more cautious? And also, like, okay, you can always wonder, what if the vaccine got approved 2 weeks earlier? But is it coming down to 2 weeks? Because the vaccinating period already is so long. So your grandfather could have been at the end of the list, so it would have taken another 2 months. Can you then really blame the European Union for waiting 2 weeks, for example?
Okay, all right. So I guess I would just suggest, not, just for discussions purposes, that somebody who's more favorable to Brexit might say, trying to create these broader European bodies, these broader European organizations is making too much bureaucracy. I mean, why couldn't we just have a system where everybody in the European Union recognizes each other's national medicines regulatory agencies' rulings? Britain would rely upon Italy or France's regulatory agency, just like Italy and France and Germany give high respect to Britain's regulatory agency. Or is that the problem? People don't really have full confidence in the Greek
Might be.
Medicines Regulatory Agency. I mean, is Britain really going to rely on Greece's Medicines Regulatory Agency to determine whether or not British people will get vaccines because the Greek regulatory agency says it's okay? No.
Yes, that's true. I can see it. That
We're not,
perspective.
let's pick on the other people, like the Bulgarian regulatory agency or the Romanian regulatory agency.
Well, to be very fair, I wouldn't actually. I would rather trust France or the UK or Germany instead of Romania, for example.
Yeah, but Germany and France are the main supporters of European integration. So you don't want to humiliate and embarrass the Bulgarians and the Greeks.
No, that's
right?
true.
By saying, well, you have to show European solidarity. So if that means we have to wait 2 more weeks, we're going to wait 2 more weeks, even though BioNTech is a German company and we know it's okay. We Germans have got to wait because we're good Europeans.
But I feel like the statement might be too broad, because maybe indeed we need to fasten the period of acceptance and maybe rely more on each other. But to say that the entire structure of the European Union is not effective for the well-being of its Europeans, I feel like that's too broad to say. So
yeah, it's an interesting question and issue, and something that the pandemic is giving us the opportunity to explore, in terms of exposing all of these political issues and tensions and objectives and aims that might be conflicting at different times. That the Germans and the French are committed to European integration, so they're not going to undermine the European Medicines Agency. They're going to work through the European Medicines Agency with its 27 member state countries participating, with the doctors and scientists from at least 27 different European Union countries, 28 if you include Britain, which is still in until the end of this month. And so if it's going to take 2 more weeks, we're going to take the 2 more weeks. And the British are saying, no, we don't think we want to do that anymore.
Now that you mentioned that we need to trust more on each other because we want integration.
Yeah, well, people are not going to trust the Estonian Medicines Agency. They're not going to trust the Lithuanian Medicines Agency. They're not going to do that, right? But you're not going to make the German Medicines Agency the regulatory agency for all of Europe, because the French and the Italians and the others won't accept that, because they have French doctors and Italian doctors and Polish doctors and medicine and scientists and scientific establishments. They're not going to accept Germany speaking for everybody. There has to be something that looks European there. And it has to look European, it's got to act European, which means it's complicated and long, and because it's complicated. Interesting. Okay, heads is 1 and 2, and it is heads. So heads is 1, and it is heads, group 1. So Hyun Chung Sung, what did your group come up with?
So I guess we align more towards disagree. So what we said is that democracy is inefficient by design, and that COVID-19 is a little bit of a special case to actually argue that the European Union is better or worse for the well-being for the whole of Europe. Like COVID-19, like in essence, in theory, it is easy to solve, because all you have to do is pretty much endeavor to protect the lives of your citizens, get a vaccine and whatnot. I mean, but COVID-19, like I said, is a special case. Like in a broader sense, like in more complex issues, democracy has done far more good for the people. Like they increased the quality of life of Europe overall. There was greater economic prosperity overall. I mean, people can argue if that's true or not, but overall, in general, that is true. And that's because that in democracy, people's opinions do not get stifled. And unfortunately, it is inefficient by design. You can't have equal representation and efficiency. That's not how it works. Then you are going to argue that you want the European Union to be more authoritarian, because that's democracy. You can't really do anything about it.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
we conclude that you can't put democracy into question just because of an aberration of a situation.
Yeah, I think I just, in terms of responding to you, in terms of you provoking my thoughts, that, yeah, I mean, the democracy means representing the will of the people of Europe, and the people of Europe are still divided by national identities. And so you have to accommodate their national sovereignty concerns. That means you can't just say German Medicine Agency, okay, not just the German one, the German, the French, the Italian Medicines Agency. They speak for all 27 member states because they're, and I don't even know if the French and the Germans would accept the Italian one, because Italy also has a reputation of having a big problem with corruption, right? Corruption, bribing people, bribing government officials, not having, so yeah, I don't think the French and the Germans would accept the Italian medicine agency speaking for them, but the European Union is not going to accept that France and German medicine regulatory agencies speak for all 27 countries of the European Union. They're just, they won't accept it because, for a number of reasons, including the fact that it's humiliating, but also it undermines, one could argue it undermines, for example, the desire to develop biotech. If you're Polish or Bulgarian or Romanian, you want to develop your country. You want your people to become prosperous and rich the way the Japanese are or the way the Americans are. And that means biotech. And if Germany and France are the official leaders of the biotech sector, who's going to take seriously? It means there's less likelihood of people investing in biotech in Poland, maybe, right? I mean, Koreans know this. Koreans have made a major investment in biotech because it's important for the national development of the country and the national power of the country in the world, by being on your technologically cutting edge. So you have to accommodate European national identities. And that means it cannot look more too authoritarian. So, okay, the Germans wait, even though BioNTech is a German company, and they're going to wait 2 more weeks. And so some number of people are going to die in Germany that would not have died if the vaccinations began now, like they are in Britain. Some number of people are going to die in Germany, and those people are going to die because we have to act in a democratic fashion in Europe. That's the cold, brutal statement of the implications of these value trade-offs we have about being European and democratic at the same time in a world in which Europe is still divided into nation states. Yeah, I mean, that point was made in some of your essays a few weeks back. It's hard to have a democracy when you don't have a people, when you don't have a demos. That's the Greek term, right? Like a democracy, demos means people. There are lots of peoples in Europe, national peoples. There is a European people identity, but it's weaker than German, Italian, French, Polish, Greek identities amongst your typical citizens of those countries. So you have to accommodate if you're going to be democratic. I mean, it's an interesting issue, right? That
like
German
government
company
can't win.
Yeah. So, and this, of course, is before the British have even approved their own British vaccine developed by AstraZeneca, the Swedish company AstraZeneca, and University of Oxford are developing a vaccine that's a lot easier to use because it doesn't have to be stored at minus 94 degrees Fahrenheit or minus 70 degrees Celsius is the case for the Pfizer vaccine. The Moderna's vaccine coming up in a couple of weeks at minus 20. The AstraZeneca Oxford vaccine just doesn't need special refrigeration capabilities, and it's already being produced in that AstraZeneca vaccine. By the way, I mean, it's already being produced in India. Months ago, I heard and read a news report about how AstraZeneca and Oxford had sent a batch or a composition of the vaccine to the Serum Institute in India. The Serum Institute in India is a organization that produces vaccines by the hundreds of millions every year, right? Because typically for most pharmaceutical companies in the West, they don't make a lot of money off of vaccines. They don't make money off of making vaccines for flu, right? That's boring. That's low budget. That's low profit. So they don't really like to do it, except if it's very exotic vaccination, right? Like for against HPV virus in women, or Gardasil, for example, is a vaccine that makes a lot of money, or the expensive vaccines to fight HIV. So they outsource the production of these vaccines that don't make a lot of money to India and China. So India's already got the infrastructure, and they got a delivery of this AstraZeneca vaccine. It was in the spring or summer. It was in the summertime. So they already have it. They're already producing and preparing to, they're already producing it. They're just waiting for the approval. And now of that AstraZeneca vaccine. And once it gets approved by that same British regulatory agency, the Indians will start distributing it, assuming it's going to be approved, which it probably will. And of course, India is was formerly part of the British Empire. It's part of the British Commonwealth. And I don't think that's a coincidence, right? And, so this role of nationalism and technology and high tech and being a leader, a global leader in technology and economic development is so critical in today's world in which warfare is suicidal. Direct warfare is suicidal because of nuclear weapons. So now countries compete by delivering development and technology and providing models, right? And so, okay, so British regulators are also vetting a vaccine developed by AstraZeneca, a British-Swedish company, and the University of Oxford that is cheaper and easier to store than Pfizer's. But they did something strange in developing the AstraZeneca vaccine. You heard these reports, right? That they found that the AstraZeneca vaccine, all these vaccines so far, all of them require 2 doses, right? One, and you got to wait 3 or 4 weeks and you get the second dose the next week. And the AstraZeneca results were that it was 65% effective. Like 65% of the people that received the vaccine developed a strong immune response to the coronavirus. Whereas Pfizer and Moderna's new technology vaccine is 95% effective, right? But then they said, but we found, they argued, that if you give half a dose the first time of the AstraZeneca vaccine to the patient, half a dose, and then the full second dose later, you get 90% effectiveness. And people said, what? And they found out, they claim what the news reports are right now is that it indicates that somehow, or they're saying that AstraZeneca made a mistake in doing the testing, and they gave like 2,800 subjects, volunteer participants, by accident, unintentionally, almost 3,000, half of the first dose instead of the full first dose. And that's how they supposedly know that if you give half a dose now and a full dose a month later, you get 90% effectiveness. And we don't know what to make of this. As I follow the news reports, as I read the New York Times, people are still, what are they talking? What's going on here? What's with the AstraZeneca vaccine? I don't understand. But the nice thing about the AstraZeneca vaccine is that it can be easily distributed in poor places of the world that don't require, incredible technology to keep the vaccine cold, because it can be stored in regular temperatures. The AstraZeneca vaccine. Okay, so back to the breakout rooms here. And so we did I think it was groups 1 and 4. And so group 2 is heads. And it is heads. So Che Hui Kyung, what did your group decide?
Actually, we haven't decided.
Oh, you can't decide? Why can't you decide?
But can I give you the. Can you give me my opinion?
Well, yeah, tell us first though why your group could not decide.
Because we haven't talked about much.
Okay, well then give your own decision, own opinion.
Okay. So I think the point of this topic is the quickness of work.
What?
The quickness, the speed, the efficiency. Can you hear me?
Say it again.
The efficiency.
The efficacy, okay.
Efficiency.
Efficiency, yes.
Yes, yes. So I think the European Union is too large and complex to make important and quick decisions than a single government, single state. Yeah, it takes a lot of time, and I think it's one of the shortcomings of EU complexity. So I agree that the UK case shows that the EU could be inflexible in dealing with important decisions.
Okay, yeah. By the way, the Americans are going to approve next week, but they've already been shipping some Pfizer BioNTech vaccine production from Belgium because the big factory that Pfizer has in Europe, I guess one of the big factories for producing the vaccine is in Belgium. So 2 days ago, there was a report that there was an airline flight from Belgium with dosages of the vaccine to Chicago. So again, it's not going to Belgians, it's not going to Germans, it's going to Americans, and now to British, but still not to Belgians, even though you Belgian students, it's being produced in your country. Because we have some Belgian students.
Professor, I read in the papers that from the 5th of January, they will start vaccinating the people of Belgium.
Oh,
yes.
Well, 5th of January. Oh yeah, no, I thought you, okay, 5th of January. That's a long time. That's a month from now.
Yes, but you still need to produce it. And so I still find that quite quick period, actually.
Yeah, but what, I mean, again, but they're producing it already and it's going to America and Britain. It's not going
well, they're going samples there, but do you actually start vaccinating large amounts of people?
I mean, they're going to start vaccinating on Monday morning at 7 o'clock in Britain, people in the hospitals. Because the hospitals have, the big hospitals, the ones that have the technology to store vaccines at minus 70 degrees centigrade, right? I assume doctors and nurses and cleaning staff, the people that work in the hospitals, they're going to be the first ones to be vaccinated. And I think they're getting, they're getting 800,000 doses. Britain's getting 800,000 doses and they're going to start vaccinating people on Monday. December, what today's the 4th, December 5, 6, December 7. And again, just to provoke you, I'm trying to provoke you. And then those 800,000 doses are not going to Belgians, they're going to Brits.
Yes, but imagine it's, for example, being the United States having found the vaccine as first, and they would first make a deal, for example, with China or Russia, and Europe had to wait another 2 months. I think we should be somehow still grateful for the 5th of January.
Yeah, that's the point in that article, that these companies, these countries have already made pre-approval purchases of 100 million or 200 million doses, and that was what's critical. And of course, the poor countries, they don't have the money to spend to buy 100 million doses. Although it's interesting that as I told you, it was in the summertime and maybe even the late spring. I read in the New York Times that AstraZeneca sent the vaccine to be ready to be produced in India back in May or June. So they're going to start rolling that out a lot sooner than, than we might be expecting it. And they're not charging, I mean, they must not be charging, it's cheap too. The AstraZeneca vaccine is cheap compared to the Pfizer and the Moderna vaccines, which are like much more expensive, but India is much more very poor place. So, okay. And so group 3, Cho Hyun-chun, what did your group decide?
We also didn't talk too much and to have a position. I think we have a position in 3, that neutral and cannot decide, that we cannot find the link, the relation between the early approval and the complexity of European Union.
Well, I mean, we were trying to highlight that the the European Union is 27 countries, and so they they are trying to come up with a European position on vaccinating people in Europe, on distributing the vaccine, and rather than do it in terms of my nation first before anybody else, they're trying to avoid all of that, and the result is that the Europeans, in sum of all of those forces, all those factors, make Europe slower than the British and the Americans in approving this vaccine, because the Americans, as I said, they're going to approve in 6 days from now, 7 days from now. But the British already approved it yesterday. And of course, the British are leaving the European Union, so the British can't speak for the European Union. And so it's interesting that the European Union is going to continue to rely upon the European Medicines Agency, which regulates vaccines across the European Union, is expected to make a decision with the Pfizer vaccine later in December. And I think 2 weeks from now, maybe even later. But as I said, every day, thousands and thousands of people are dying in the world. Just 3,000 died yesterday in the United States. I don't know how many died in total around the whole world. So yeah, I mean, it highlights the trade-offs from all of this, all of these considerations and values that you have, that you want to act in a democratic way in Europe, in which there's not a single demos, in which there's multiple national groups. So we have to, we cannot create a de facto Franco-British empire like under Charlemagne that speaks for all of Europe by saying, French and German vaccine regulators, they can speak for Bulgarians and Greeks and Lithuanians and Poles. No, that cannot happen. And so if it's not going to happen, it's going to be more complicated and therefore slower in terms of the approval process. Interesting. This is interesting. Okay, so let's go back then to the notes, because we should look at the notes before we go to our debate. Let me close this. And it says you can see the notes, so I hope you can see the notes. So we covered already the Brexit vote. We talked, about how, okay, the referendum. Why did the British have a referendum? British nationalism, at least towards Europe, is stronger than in other countries. And there's a lot of reasons for that, including historical reasons. German nationalism, Italian nationalism, even French nationalism doesn't have a very proud history in the 20th century, right? I mean, German and Italian nationalism gave us Hitler and Mussolini, who brought their countries into ruinous defeat. French nationalism, of course, won World War I, but the loss and the bloodshed was so horrible. And then, of course, the French army, the military, did not perform well at the start of World War II. And then the French they lost part of their empires, their empire in Africa, and then in Southeast Asia when they lost Algeria, and they lost what we used to call French Indochina. French Indochina, which is today Vietnam, Laos, Cambodia, and they lost that territory. And in wars, they were as a result of war. And so, but the British, of course, they think that they're winners, even though they have a terrible imperial history. You know, the way they let Indian people starve to death during famine because, you know, what are you going to do? You know, these people, there's so many of them, etc. That's the stereotype they had. But the British nationalists conveniently forget about that. They just focus upon Britain's victory in World War I and World War II. And we keep coming back to Margaret Thatcher, right? That she was the legendary and controversial prime minister who served from 1979 to 1990 and lost her position finally because other leaders in the Conservative Party would no longer tolerate her hostility to European integration. And so you got a sense of that hostility from that video clip I showed you when she said, no, 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 to forming a federal Europe. And, but of course, she came in 1979 as prime minister and only 6 years earlier did Britain join the European Economic Community in 1973 at the low point of British pride in its post-war history. As I already described, Britain by this point had lost almost all of its empire to become renamed as the Commonwealth, so to speak. And Britain had been humiliated in the Suez Crisis in 1956 by the United States of all actors, forcing Britain to abandon its efforts to occupy the Sinai Peninsula in Egypt along with France and Israel to try to topple and remove the Gamal Abdel Nasser, the authoritarian nationalist leader, military dictatorship that nationalized the Suez Canal that had been owned and operated by the British to take it and add it to Egypt and reassert Egypt's sovereignty over the Suez Canal. And the Americans demanded that the British and the French and the Israelis withdraw in 1956, and the British, obeyed. And then, of course, in the economic malaise and difficulty in Britain, culminating when in the early 1970s, when Britain actually had to go to the International Monetary Fund to get a loan to cover its balance of payments deficits due to, along with inflation, low economic growth, high frequency of militant labor activity, strikes activity that to many British people infuriated them and led them to support the Conservative Party. And Margaret Thatcher made that one of her first objectives, was to break the power of the trade unions, of the labor union movement in Britain, and focusing on the coal miners. And there used to be hundreds of thousands of people that worked in the coal mines in Great Britain. The coal mines had been state subsidized, state owned, state controlled, as part of the commitment of post-World War II Britain to using socialism to improve the quality of life of the mass of the British workforce, of the British people. And she started closing these coal mines that were not making money, that were losing money. British coal is very deep, buried very deep. There's a lot cheaper places to find coal, like in the United States and elsewhere. And she wanted to close these coal mines if these coal mines were costing the British government money, because the government had to spend money to subsidize them. And of course, the coal miners rebelled and went on strike, and she broke the strike. And just, I think it might have been this year or last year, the last coal mine operating in Britain closed. So there are no longer any coal mines in Britain today, as of last year. She got credit then for the economic revival of Britain, that in the into the 1980s and 1990s, Britain's economy grew much faster, significantly faster than the French economy, the German economy. Of course, the Germans were dealing with the unification of Eastern Germany, faster than the Italian economy. And Britain looked like the economic leader of Europe in terms of its high growth rate, low unemployment, and of course, greater income difference between the wealthy and the poor, greater economic differentiation, greater socioeconomic inequality, but it made British nationalists feel proud that Britain was a leader in addressing economic problems confronting the developed world. And Brexit has to be traced back to her, right? In terms of her skepticism of it. And then she was removed. She was replaced by John Major of the Conservative Party. And then he became prime minister from 1992 to 1997 following an election. And then Tony Blair and Gordon Brown from the Labour Party, which of course had their main source of support in the trade union movement, including among the Labour Party, including among the coal miners. But Tony Blair and Gordon Brown were like Bill Clinton and Barack Obama and probably Joe Biden. They're neoliberals, right? That we must promote globalization, free movement of, remove barriers to movement of capital across international boundaries between states, free trade. They were, in a lot of ways, children or offspring of Margaret Thatcher, because Margaret Thatcher was the first to ram through neoliberal von Hayek, Austrian school economic theorists, liberalization of the economy to end in high inflation and low growth, but with greater income differentiation between the wealthy and the non-wealthy. And they also reflected the British nationalism and pride and Euroscepticism, because for a lot of those people that advocated neoliberalism, they saw European Union as a bastion or institutional support for socialism, social democracy, higher taxation, more government services, paid through high taxation, and pointing to the relatively low economic growth rates in places like Italy and France and Germany, saying we don't want to be like that. Tony Blair and Gordon Brown responded to that, and David Cameron was elected leader of the Conservative Party in 2005, and then the Conservative Party continues to grow in popularity and support. And then in 2010, he becomes the Prime Minister of Britain. And we already talked about David Cameron and how he campaigned in 2015 with a promise to have a referendum on whether or not to United Kingdom would remain in the European Union. And we know what happened. He was trying to appease conservative Eurosceptics in the party. So we've got, let me go back and remind myself, I think we have one debater. And the reason I mention this is because I don't need to use all of my time if we have a debate. So there's some flexibility. So I am pro. And so this is leading into our debate topic. To South Koreans, the United Kingdom's integration in the European Union will continue despite the United Kingdom no longer being a formal member of the European Union. So let me find a good place to stop here on the notes. We already said that, what does it mean to leave the European Union? Can you still be European and not be in the European Union? Norway and Switzerland are not part of the European Union, but are they European? Are they a part of the European integration, even though they're not formally part of the European Union? And some of my comments to your paragraphs, right? Russia is economically intensively dependent upon the European Union. Russia sells, I think, $400 billion worth of oil and gas to Europe every year. I mean, Europe gets most of its natural gas for heating and other uses, including production. It gets most of its oil and gas from Russia. Russia imports most of its products from Europe. But we tend not to view Russia as being part of European integration. We don't believe Russia is acting in a European way when we say that Switzerland or Norway tend to behave in a pro-European way in their policies. Why? So what does it leave? In other words, what does it mean to leave the European Union for the United Kingdom? And we're still trying to see what that means. Will there be some kind of special status for the United Kingdom? What does special status mean? But British nationalists, they want complete freedom of policy option choice by Britain to negotiate free trade agreements with the former British imperial entities, former imperial states like India or Australia or Canada. I mean, Britain just a few days ago signed a free trade agreement with Canada, keeping, note this, Britain will keep its relations with Canada that were negotiated between the Canada-European Union Free Trade Agreement that came into effect a year or two ago. So Canada and European Union have an FTA, a free trade agreement. Britain, just a few days ago, agreed with Canada that they, through a treaty, that they will keep that kind of relationship that Canada has with the European Union, that Canada will keep that with Britain. And the willingness to keep those kinds of restrictions, that kind of relationship that Britain will have with Canada might reflect the fact that, you know, that Britain, feels comfortable with Canada, more so than it feels comfortable with dealing with the 27 other member states of the European Union. And okay, so I think we should go to our debate here. There was some talk about what to do about the referendum. The referendum to leave, the Brexit referendum was not legally binding on its own sense. I mean, it was just an advisory action that the British government agreed to allow the British people to speak through a referendum as the British government decides what to do. Of course, politically, it's very difficult for any politician in Britain who wants to get reelected and have a political future to say, we changed our mind. We don't want to follow the Brexit referendum because we think it's a bad idea. If you say that, you're going to maybe end your political career in Britain. But the British governments have moved forward. Even the British Labour Party under Jeremy Corbyn, until recently, he's now been removed by Keir Starmer. He was in favor of staying in the European Union, and he was the Labour Party leader, but he didn't show a lot of enthusiasm about the European Union. You know, yeah, I guess we should stay, but and so many blamed him and the Labour Party for not working hard to persuade British voters. Again, they haven't had a second referendum, but they've had a series of elections in Britain for national elections to the House of Commons, and most recently in December of last year, a year ago. And as we said, the Conservative Party led now, at that point, not by Theresa May, who you saw speaking in that intro video, but by Boris Johnson, who was sitting next to her. He was portraying himself as the voice of Brexit. And he campaigned on the demand that we just get Brexit done. Let's finish this. And his party came in with a big, big, big victory, a so-called landslide. And finally settling the issue that Britain is not staying in the European Union. It's not staying in the European Union. And they officially left the European Union at the end of January, and now they're supposed to leave the single market by the end of this month, end of December. And they're negotiating what kind of relationship Britain will have with the European Union as we speak. And okay, so let's, I think we should go to our debate because we're running out of time. So who's going to keep time for me, for us, since I can't do it? Anybody want to volunteer? Hyo Young, you want to volunteer? Ho-ryong, you volunteer?
Okay.
Okay, so you know the rules. I speak for 6 minutes maximum. Then I have to make sure I remember to share screen with, make share screen option available to multiple participants. So now, let me see here. Let me go back to the lesson plan. So now, Che Hyung Jung, you also can share a screen when it's your turn to speak. So I will speak for up to 6 minutes, and then you speak for up to 6 minutes, and then I rebut, and then you conclude for up to 7 minutes, and then I have the last word. So, to South Koreans, I'll start now. The United Kingdom's integration in the European Union will continue despite the United Kingdom no longer being a formal member of the European Union. And I think what's likely to happen here over the next few years of the Biden administration is that you're going to see a move by the Biden administration to try to negotiate a new trade arrangements with the European Union together with Canada as part of the what was called the transatlantic trade agreement. That there had been a proposal under Barack Obama for a transatlantic. Let me see if I can find it here because yeah, this is it. And so let me stop share. And then this was proposed at the end of the Obama administration, the transatlantic trade and investment partnership. That this was being negotiated at the end of the Obama administration, and the European Commission. They were in talks with the Obama administration about creating like a trans-Pacific partnership, a TPP, that the United States under Trump withdrew from, and now Joe Biden will come back into office. And I think we might well see that this will be restarted as part of the effort to collaborate and cooperate in dealing with the pandemic crisis, and also to deal with the intensifying climate change crises that we are facing. And this may be formally proposed, but it's sort of like an expanded G20. Well, it's basically the NATO countries, right? The NATO countries are going to move more closely. NATO includes Canada, NATO includes Turkey, but there's a lot of, it's not completely the same as NATO, but there's a lot of overlap between these countries. If you notice, these countries are all NATO. Now, in this transatlantic trade and investment partnership, Canada was not going to be part of it, but that was before Trump came into office, and that was before the pandemic. And now Trump is leaving office and Joe Biden is coming back into office. And I think that Britain will continue its integration in a different format, but with the United States and Canada playing a more active role in cooperating in their economic sectors to deal with the economic crisis we're now in, and also to cooperate on dealing with the pandemic and the escalating climate crises. We already highlighted how Pfizer is an American company working with a German company, BioNTech, to develop the newest vaccine that's now been approved in Britain, right? There's going to be more and more of that, of these corporations cooperating with each other. And this would be a way by which the British would continue to integrate not just with Europe, but with North America, including their former colony, Canada, which left the British Empire to become a Commonwealth. I mean, Queen Elizabeth of Britain is still technically the head of state of Canada, right? And to integrate in the British framework, the British attitude, they like to talk about Britain being a bridge. That Great Britain, United Kingdom, I should say, is a bridge across the North Atlantic between United States and Europe. That for many, many years, the British and the Americans have talked about the so-called special relationship that exists between London and Washington. I assume going back to World War I, when the United States entered World War I in 1917 on the side of Britain against Germany. And then during the Cold War and World War II and the Cold War, and that this could well be expanded maybe in negotiations in an informal framework, like the way the European Council, right, began as an informal framework. We talked about Valéry Giscard d'Estaing being a leader in France in promoting the political cooperation, which the heads of government and state would meet within the European community to plan and coordinate their political activities, that this is going to accelerate under Biden. And we can imagine that there will be some agreements by which these countries, which are European, and there might well be a racist element of this, right? That even Donald Trump reflecting that white racist element in American national identity, these are all European countries here. And sorry?
1 minute left.
Okay, these are all European countries. So if this is portrayed as necessary, this kind of integration in order to coordinate in dealing, say, unfortunately, with China, I mean, that's the negative aspect of this, that one way to generate positive stereotypes of other countries is to make them friends because you share a common enemy, right? According to the old Arabic, supposedly it's an Arabic saying that the enemy of my enemy is my friend. If North Americans, including Canada and Europeans, come to share a perception of intensifying threat from China, it will make cooperating economically among all of these actors in the North, used to be called the North Atlantic community. The North Atlantic community includes the NATO countries, right? Here is the Atlantic Ocean. This is the North. This includes these countries. Of course, also, we see that the Europeans and the Americans are competing more and more with Russia regarding this area, the North Pole, the Arctic Ocean, which is opening up because of climate change and ice melt. So there are lots of possibilities for Britain to continue to integrate with Europe as part of the North Atlantic community. Thank you. Khan, where's Che Hyun Kyung? Che?
I'm here. Can you hear me?
Yes. Are you going to share a screen?
I just shared the screen.
Are you sharing screen?
Yep.
Okay, I see it now.
Using. Okay, good morning, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Hee-kyung Tae. Britain's relationship with the EU and European integration has rarely been smooth. Britain's Britain's decision to leave can free the Union of what Sheffield University professor Stephen George termed an awkward partner. I will introduce my argument and convince you that the United Kingdom's integration in the EU will not continue. My first point is British exceptionalism that still exists hinders the UK and the EU integration. Brexit stems from what appears to be a belief in British exceptionalism. British exceptionalism is the idea that Britain is inherently different from and superior to other nations and empires. For advocates, it may sound tempting to imagine a golden age in which Britain was competent and reliable. Britain was not always fully committed to the European cooperation. Looking at its history, it is true that unlike most people of EU 27 member states, the British did not undergo occupation and dictatorship during World War II. There is then no surprise that the concept of European integration as a peace project has resonated less with the British than it did with other Europeans. The UK was invited to take part in talks that led to the founding treaties of the EU. When the European Coal and Steel Community was instituted in 1952, the United Kingdom decided not to become a member. The British government disliked many of the supranational elements in the treaties. It was worried about damaging links with Commonwealth countries. The UK was still absent when the Treaty of Rome was signed in 1957. However, in the late 1950s, the Conservative government of Harold Macmillan changed its attitude to enter the common market. The French President Charles de Gaulle rebuffed and vetoed Britain's request. He doubted about the European spirit of the British. Britain became the reluctant European under Margaret Thatcher, and she negotiated a budget debate for Britain. She was in favor of enlargement but resisted closer European integration. Margaret Thatcher asserted British exceptionalism about the EU in a 1988 speech, and each of the past three prime ministers have approached the EU from that standpoint. They believed that Britain deserved preferential treatment and more than equal status. There is another evidence that UK was in many respects the least well-integrated EU member state. According to the data in 2018 by Nordcore, the UK has the fewest citizens working in the Commission per capita. The British presence at the Commission has been declining over time. It goes without saying that foreign language skills are necessary for any EU employee. Yet, the report showed that only 27% of UK secondary school students were studying French and German, compared to 93% of students in the rest of the EU learning English. Only 6% of British upper secondary students were learning two or more languages, compared to 60% across the EU. It has shown that the lack of British commitment to the EU. The tradition of British exceptionalism is centuries old and has adapted seamlessly to changing policy context and challenges. In conclusion, the UK government has retained this sentence in the future relationship negotiations with the EU, and the British will not be able to wholeheartedly support European integration. I will continue to touch on the rest of my point after the second affirmative speech. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. I will make my rebuttal. Well, I mean, I think that the claim that the British are exceptionally nationalistic is a theme that is overemphasized in terms of what European integration means. All of these countries are nationalistic. France is nationalistic. I think I mentioned to you how President Emmanuel Macron of France said a few weeks ago that if there had been a referendum on French exit from the European Union at some point recently, it would have passed. It's just that the French government will not have such a referendum. The French government doesn't want any more referendums, like the way the French voted down the Constitution Treaty for the European Union that Valéry Giscard d'Estaing helped try to create, the former president of France. All of these actors are nationalistic in terms of their mass public. It's just that the British elite have this desire to play a leading role in the world, but they can't, of course, because of the influence of English and the culture that was highlighted by Pro's opening statement is from the United States. People are studying English because the Americans are so dominant in finance and in security affairs, and Britain has free ridden off of that. So I think that if I were a smart structural realist. Some of you were in the foreign policy class, we talked about structural realism, right? And understand that the Americans are overcoming the security dilemma through their benign hegemony, which is combined with their liberalism and their economic and political liberalism, that basically Europe will continue to integrate, but under American hegemony. Under American hegemony, with the perhaps more active support of the Europeans now that Joe Biden is becoming president. And Europe and Britain will continue to integrate in terms of constantly collaborate, cooperate, and coordinate its policies with the other members of NATO in the North Atlantic community. The way, for example, Iceland is not part of the European Union, but the Iceland economy is intensely dependent upon the European Union. The same is true with Britain. The British economy, almost 50% of its trade is with the continent of Europe. That's not going to change. And the British are going to cooperate with regard to Ireland. If there's going to be a peaceful transition of Ireland, that's going to require the intensive cooperation of Britain's allies, the intensive cooperation of the United States. The United States played a critical role in those negotiations to bring about the Good Friday Agreement in 1998 that helped end the violence in Northern Ireland. Bill Clinton administration played an important role. Bill Clinton sent a former US Senator from Maine, whose name I can't remember. He was the mediator between the Catholics and the Protestants in Ireland. The Canadians were involved in those negotiations as well, along with the United States, the Canadian government. So this is all part of a North Atlantic community that's going to continue to integrate, particularly with the rise of China. The rise of China and what to do with Russia. What to do with Russia. Okay, Khan will now respond and conclude. Jae-Hoon Kyung, wait, Kyung.
I think UK's nationalism is very unique. It's more unique than Russians and even US nationalism. And so speaking of the integration between Russia and the EU, I would like to say it can be possible, even though they had a free trade agreement, because the EU does not yet have a firm political trust in Russia. I think integration is based on cooperation, coordination, and collaboration. With economic sanctions to Russia, the EU cut off most of its political cooperation with Russia in this year. The EU has continued to extend its measures against Russia. So, how Russia could it be a part of partner? And my second point I'd like to address is the UK's strong relationship to the United States and the Commonwealth. The UK will regain control over its national trade policy and be free to enter into its own trade agreements with other countries. During the transition period, new trade agreements continued to apply to the UK. As of June 2020, the UK had signed continuity deals covering over 8% of total UK trade with close to 50 countries or territories, including Switzerland, Liechtenstein, Chile, Israel, and South Korea. The UK also launched FTA negotiations with Australia and New Zealand, and of course, Canada. The UK is a major US trade and economic partner and a foreign direct investment. Many US and UK businesses and other groups see an FTA as an opportunity to enhance market access and align UK regulations more closely with those of the United States than of the EU. According to an official website of the United States government, it says that the United States had no closer partner than the United Kingdom on the United Kingdom page. The UK had long had a special relationship with the United States, and this would render unnecessary the United Kingdom's choice of striving exclusively for deep economic integration with either continental Europe or the USA. And for all these reasons, I disagree the United Kingdom's integration in the EU will continue.
Well, in terms of my concluding statement, ladies and gentlemen, Britain is continuing as a member of NATO, like Iceland is a member of NATO, the way Norway is a member of NATO, and those countries are all economically integrated in the North Atlantic Economic Community. And I think that we should talk about that as a North Atlantic Economic Community. Okay, it doesn't exist as a formal treaty, piece of paper signed by leaders, but that's what we're talking about. International law is the foundation of the European Union, but it's a formalization of practice. You formalize in the form of writing down as principles that you all agree on. That's what a treaty is. It's the formally writing down and agreeing on these principles as how we're going to go about doing our business. So let's not make such a big focus, a big emphasis on formal treaty agreements as necessary for integration to occur. If there's a positive attitude towards cooperation, collaboration, and coordination of policy, like for example, the G20, right? They increase and collaborate and cooperate, or the G8, right? Or G7 without Russia. They cooperate, or the way South Korea closely collaborates and cooperates with the United States in its policies. You don't need formal treaty arrangements for that to happen. And integration is a process of informally cooperating, coordinating, collaborating to achieve some bigger objective, like for example, dealing with climate change or dealing with the threat of authoritarianism in China, the one-party authoritarian dictatorship that is may threaten the interests of non-authoritarian, pro-democratic countries. So, does anybody have any questions for extra credit?
Sir, I have a question.
Yes. Who are you?
It's Kim Hyun, sir.
Yeah, because there's nothing on your screen as your name. Okay, go ahead.
Okay. I have a question to the Khan, and question is, Russia is engaging in intensive trade with the EU, but does this fact mean that Russia is integrating with the EU?
Khan?
Yeah, to Khan.
Khan, what do you have to say?
I think I actually answered this question before, my statement. But to be clear, I'd like to say the EU put sanctions into Russia, and they have political issues between EU and Russia. Like the EU cut off most of its political cooperation with Russia. So they how they could how Russia could be partner for EU.
Okay, I think that's where we'll stop there. And so let's go to the poll. And who won the week 14 debate? Please vote. One more person. One more voter. Well, I don't want to wait too much, waste too much time waiting for one vote, because 14 of 15 people have voted. 20 seconds. 15 seconds. 10 seconds. 5 seconds. Okay, so let me share the results. So you think Khan won, huh? Okay. And stop sharing. And now grade the debate. Please grade the debate. Okay, that's it. And so there you see the results. And that's all for today. So I'm going to end the class and I will post the link to the recording, okay? Bye.
Professor, I have a question.
Yes.
Personal question. Yeah, I found that you haven't give me a feedback on my assignment.
Okay, I'll check on it, okay?
Thank you.
Okay, bye.